Thank you for that introduction, Bo. And I agree with you. The community is coming to us on this file. And I have some thoughts, although I'm kind of embarrassed for the level of this presentation. This is the University of Toronto I'm speaking at. You are one of the cradles of the genesis of deep learning, the AI technology that's changing the world. So if the level of this is too low and too general, I apologize. I just assume you're all experts here. I'll start with a definition because it's hard. AI has been with us for decades. For most of us, for most of our lives. We're used to Netflix giving us recommendations of shows we'd like to watch. We're used to Amazon saying, hey, you want to buy this product? Like, yeah, I kind of do want to buy that product. So AI and machine learning aren't new, but something feels different since the productization of large language models in ChatGPT. And what's new is generative AI as a product. So how do you define that? When I say AI today, I'm going to use this definition. This is not the world's best definition of generative AI, but it is a definition a panel I chaired for the Canadian research funders came up with. So we fought for 4 hours, really smart people in a room fighting about the definition. So the amount of human labor in this is really high. So I'm invested in this definition now. So AI, for our purposes today, are systems that have a really easy to use user interface. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to read a user manual. You don't have to go to a boot camp. You can just start using it. They enable iterative design. So if you're using Copilot or ChatGPT and you don't like an output, you can say, I didn't like paragraph 2. Let's talk about that, and go back and forth. They make a huge amount of information available to you. And probably most saliently, the output is of a high enough quality that a non-expert, and maybe even an expert, might mistake it for human-generated. So we're all living through the AI transformation. What do things look like here in the spring of 2024? Some of you have probably seen OpenAI's announcement, not release, of their product Sora. And Sora lets you type in some text, here's what I'd like to see, and it generates a video for you. And it's a short video right now, and it's not always perfect, but it's pretty good. And so the media response to this and to seeing the demos was, that's the end of Hollywood. You know, you don't need Netflix. You'll just go to Sora and say, I want to watch a spy thriller with Gary Oldman, but I don't want it to be slow horses. And it'll say, sure, do you want to be a character in the show? I can do that too. And that's all true. That type of disruption is coming. That type of empowerment for creators is coming, but it's a little ways off. And it's not even the real story. Jim Fan, who's a senior research scientist at NVIDIA, recognized right away what the real story is. If you watch this video, I mean, even in the still frame, you can see that the lights are reflecting properly. If the reflections in those puddles weren't right, you wouldn't believe the photo. It wouldn't look right. When she steps in the puddle, it ripples. So this model, this neural network, has a model of the physics of our world. It knows how light works. It knows how fluid mechanics work, like simulating an approximation of the Navier-Stokes equations. When she walks, it's believable because it has a model of the kinematics of human motion. And when she interacts with other people in the scene, that's also believable because it has a model of human behavior. If you had told me, as a computer scientist 10 years ago, that an approximate whole world simulator would fit in 80 gigabytes of floating point numbers, so you can store that on your MacBook hard drive, no problem, I would have said you're crazy. Like, the universe is way too complex. And yet, here we are. How many people here have used a chatbot? ChatGPT, Copilot, see a show of hands. Okay, that's good. So the technology underlying these chatbots is large language models, which are a specific type of deep neural net with specific architectures. And one of the things early language models were not good at is attending to information that was old. So these models have a context window that they can access. And things that got further back in the context window were harder to access, and the recall wasn't as good. That problem has largely been solved with better architectures and better training techniques, but it's still something we test for with a new large language model. And we do what's called a needle in a haystack test, where here's a big haystack of information, can you pull the needle out? Claude 3 Opus is the latest model from a company called Anthropic. They're a split off from OpenAI, and it is one of the best frontier models available right now. And when it was being tested with the needle in the haystack test, you can see from the nice green up there that it did a great job, passed needle in haystack test, but it did something that previous LLMs hadn't. It was prompted to do the test, did the test, passed it, and then added, unprompted, but like, hold on. You gave me like 100 textbooks worth of software documentation, and there's one sentence in there about pizza toppings. That's absurd unless you're testing me. Are you testing me? So if a 6-year-old kid did that in a lab school, the psychologist would say, evidence of precocious metacognition. Check. Feels weird to talk about a machine doing cognition, but I don't know how else to name that. That looks and feels and acts like metacognition. So when I was in grad school and got interested in natural computing and neural computation, it was a really, really risky bet. It was the year 2000, and computers were lousy at just about all human-like tasks. We could kind of do a little bit of voice recognition, a little bit of handwriting recognition, but really complex tasks, no good. Something like next paragraph completion. I give you a paragraph of text and say, write the next paragraph in this document. That is a complex task. It requires a lot of synthetic thinking. You need to understand the topic, be able to continue the topic. You have to understand tone and style. As of 2019, computers still sucked at that. That was not something they could do well. By 2022, they could do it better than most of our undergrads. And so when you look at this chart, you can pick your favorite, this is the skill that defines me as a human, because I don't think dolphins can do this, and I don't think monkeys, this is me. Machines are getting better and better at these skills, and the rate at which this is happening is getting faster and faster. So I have an 11th grade math student at home who saw me making these charts and said, Dad, you can't put that slide up, you didn't label your axes. You're right. So the bottom axis is time, and the y-axis is pick your favorite technology. It could be the number of printing presses in Europe. It could be the number of mobile phones owned by humans on planet Earth. In the early uptake phase of a successful technology, the rate of uptake is typically exponential, and the rate of improvement is typically exponential. It'll be sigmoidal eventually, it'll plateau, but this happens. And the problem with this is when you're right there in the knee of the curve, as humans, our best model for tomorrow is today. When I think about like, what's tomorrow gonna look like? I'm gonna get up, I'm gonna make coffee because that's my job, I'm gonna drag my teenagers out of bed, and it's gonna be a fight, and that is a really good model. But we're looking retrospectively and projecting forward. And in a plot like that, you might think, okay, this AI thing's kind of important, you know, like maybe in 5 to 10 years it'll be a big deal. But if you turn around and look prospectively, you're looking at a brick wall. The rate of change is very high. So this is a university. We all work in universities, and students are our main stakeholder. You know, we do a lot of great things in universities, but when you look at our income statement, undergrad students pay the bills. So what's the future of being a student in a world with this technology? Bill Gates said this over a year ago at a Global Silicon Valley Summit at Arizona State. And so we actually don't have 18 months now, we only have 5 months left. Bill Gates says AI is going to be a better tutor than any human. And I don't totally agree with him, because I think there are things that I can do when I interact with my students that a machine can't yet, but there are a lot of things a machine can do that I can't. It knows more than I ever will, even if I spent the rest of my life studying. It's infinitely patient, and we're going to see a few examples of that. This is from a paper by Ethan Mollick and colleagues. They took junior consultant cohort going into the Boston Consulting Group, and they split the cohort into a control group that did the sort of hazing ritual they do with their junior consultants the way they'd always done it, and that's the blue group there. And then into a group that got access to ChatGPT Pro, so it was GPT-4, that's the green group. And the red group got access and also a weekend boot camp on here's how to use generative AI. And so the first thing you notice is that the group that got the boot camp did a little bit better, but really not that much better than the group that just got access to it with no training. Just here's a tool you can use, go. So the final products, the case studies, were evaluated by senior partners who know their business, and the control cohort got an average of 4 out of 8, and like I said, they like to haze their junior consultants, so that's what they expected. But the group that had access to ChatGPT did 2 full points better on an 8-point scale. Now, not every job is business consulting, but if you're in business consulting, there's data that says you can be a lot better if you adopt this technology. That's not an opinion anymore, it's been measured. Except for that poor little red lump on the far left-hand side. That poor person, they even got the boot camp, and they still just could not produce a good report. So good news, if you suck at your job, AI makes you 43% better. But even if you're in the upper half, average improvement of 17%. And again, this is business consulting, which is a highly integrative task, but it doesn't resemble everything you might want to do. But that, I don't know about you, but I would be happy to have a free 17% improvement in how good I am at producing outputs that my boss wants. Here's one really focused on something obscure. So this is Claude 3 Opus. I asked it to adopt the persona of an Assyriologist, professor of Assyriology, because that works really well with a lot of frontier LLMs. If you give them a persona, they'll really dig in and provides so much context for them. And then I said, create a course outline for me on the Hurrian language. And I picked Hurrian because it's super obscure. It is a very poorly attested language from the ancient Near East. There's not that much writing. There's really one good reference grammar. And as far as I know, there's only been one course taught at the University of Chicago 12 years ago, and the web page is gone. So create a course outline for Hurrian. And it did. And I showed it to a friend of mine who's an Assyriologist, and she said, I could teach this. And so that's not just an aid to a teacher, that's an aid to a student who just gets fascinated with the Hurrians for some reason, and I can't just jump into the reference grammar, I need some guidance on how I'm gonna get there. Today's technology is pretty good at helping you navigate a pathway through human knowledge. I spend a lot of time talking to our undergrads, doing town halls and small group conversations, and when I do town halls with them, this is my favorite example, I took the course outline from our second year circuits course. So this is a really important course if you're an electrical engineer, and I dropped it into ChatGPT Pro, and I said to ChatGPT, I confess I'm a bad person. I haven't been to class ever. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, and my final's tomorrow, and help. And it did a really good job of triaging the material. It used what was in the course outline with its latent knowledge of electrical engineering, and it gave me a list of, here's what you should study to get the most part marks on your exam, and I looked at the list and I thought, yep, that is really good. And so I said, let's go, teach me, but be gentle, because I'm kind of dumb, obviously, because I'm studying at 2 o'clock in the morning before the final. And it did. It started off, okay, we're gonna talk about phasors. Let's talk about a Ferris wheel, Mark. We'll go slow and we'll eventually get to the math. And I went back and forth with it for a while. And a couple of observations. It was good. The information it gave me was correct. When I stumbled, it helped me. It was actually kind of supportive. It gave me a few pep talks. Like, hey, Mark, you're doing great. It didn't judge me, not even once. It didn't say, Mark Daley, you are a bad person. You should have gone to class. I feel like if one of my students called me at 2 o'clock in the morning and asked for 4 hours of personal tutoring, I would be less charitable than ChatGPT. And so, this is an always on, always available, non-judgmental tutor. It's not perfect. It does make mistakes. You have to check its work, but it's pretty good. And there was no available human at 2 o'clock in the morning. So this is the best available alternative, and it's a good one. But there's also an accessibility component here. Our top universities, and certainly the University of Toronto, are international universities, and we want to be part of the global conversation. We want students to come here from all over the world. During my time at CFAR, I had to do a lot of meetings in Ottawa where I realized when everyone code switches to French, I lose 50 IQ points because my French is not that good. My cognitive bucket is full, struggling with a language that I'm only partially competent in. I can't imagine studying algebraic topology in a foreign language. And so these chatbots offer us opportunities here. Halfway through my conversation with ChatGPT, where it was tutoring me, I said, "Nihongo ga wakarimasu ka?" And it said, "Yeah, sure, I speak Japanese," and just immediately flipped into Japanese and continued to tutor me in Japanese. And so this isn't Google Translate. Google Translate, I can take a document in the language of instruction, translate it into my preferred language, but it's a one-off, it's one and done. Here, I can ask follow-up questions. I can engage in a dialogue, and that's a whole different way of interacting with information. Another favorite of our students, here I am pretending I'm applying for a master's degree in philosophy, and I wrote a candidate statement, and this is back to Anthropic's Claude 3. And so I dumped my candidate statement in and said, "Can you be a really grumpy, judgy philosophy professor and tell me what you think about my applicant statement?" And it did. It gave me a really good set of feedback, and then it sort of concluded at the end and said, "By the way, Mark, if you're planning on submitting this, save yourself the application fee. There's just no way you're getting in. But do you want me to help you fix it?" Yes. And I had written something that I thought would be kind of sophomoric, and it picked up on that, and we went back and forth, and by the end of it, we had a really nice candidate statement that properly referenced multiple fields of philosophy, things I didn't even, just doing this little exercise, I learned stuff I didn't know. And so that's a really useful tool, and it's an especially useful tool if you do not come from privilege. If you come from a background of privilege, you probably have mentors. Your parents, your friends know people who can sit down and edit your candidate statement for you. If you don't have access to that, you now do. This isn't quite the same as having a human mentor, of course, but it's a lot better than having nothing and being left totally on your own to navigate something that's probably pretty important to you. This is my favorite slide because it's data and not anecdote. What you are looking at is the level of play amongst professional Go players. And you have to trust me that you can quantify level of play. You actually can. This is a pretty good metric. And what you see from 1950 through to the mid-2010s is that the level of play is stagnant. There's some variance and there's a couple of outliers in there, but we really felt like humans have solved Go. We know how to play the game of Go. We know how to train new humans to play the game of Go. We know the major strategies. It's a done deal. It's still fun to see people compete at that level, but there's really nothing new to learn. And then something happened in 2016. DeepMind's AlphaGo beat the world's best Go player. And between 2016 and 2018, many of the world's top Go players started training with AI. Everyone now has an AI tutor. And what we observe is after 70 years of stagnation, the level of human-to-human Go play, this is not humans playing machines, this isn't humans showing up with I'm gonna have my AI play for me, this is humans playing against humans, the level is going up. And so that is solid evidence that using an AI tutor can improve your skill as a human, even at the absolute frontier of an abstract strategy game. So, what's the future of being a professor? We've established that AI, generative AI, is pretty good at teaching. It's less judgy than me. It's available 24/7. It knows more stuff than I do. I'm not feeling so good about teaching. I mean, there are actually, of course, human interaction parts of teaching, and there are things that technology can't do, but a lot of what used to be my value proposition as a prof is changing, and so that's interesting. But maybe I can fall back on my research, right? That's a big part of what I do as a professor. This is sort of the reaction. That purple line there is some of my colleagues saying, no, AI will never be able to do research. Not in my area. Everything's going to be just fine. Guillaume here is a quantum computing researcher who 2 days after Anthropic released Claude 3 posted this on Twitter. He had a little paper he'd been working on, and he confessed, this is just a cute little algorithm in quantum computing. It's new, it's enough to get a paper out of, but it's not going to change the world. But he hadn't published it anywhere. This was all just sort of his handwritten, scribbled notes. And he thought, I'm going to see if I can prompt Claude 3 to figure out the algorithm. Now, he needed to know what prompt to ask it, but he asked one prompt and then another prompt, and within about 27 seconds, he had replicated a result that took him 5 months to get on his own. Now, this doesn't work in every field and for every topic, but it did here. And so his initial response was, oh no, what do we need me for? But that was quickly followed by a response of, wait a minute, I can be 200 times faster pulling the threads I'm actually interested in and asking the questions I really want to answer. If you're a medical scientist, lots has been going on here for a long time. Most recent exciting result out of DeepMind and MIT earlier this year. A system similar in structure to AlphaGo, AlphaZero, discovered a whole new class of antibiotics. And this was a human-machine collaboration, but it is unlikely that this new class of antibiotics would have been discovered by a human alone if they were not collaborating with AI. So the humanists in the room are probably thinking, well, tough to be a STEM researcher, but we're going to be fine, right? This is a Reddit post from a musicologist who did their PhD on an obscure opera that had source documents from India. And the connections had never been made because this is a very obscure corner of musicology, and they thought, okay, this is going to be my doctoral thesis. And they spent years going through, they estimated, like 10,000 documents trying to make the connections, and they finally did, and that was a really interesting piece of scholarship, and they published that, and then when the generative AI revolution happened, they thought, I'm going to try Google Gemini. So Gemini is Google's large language model, productized as a chatbot, and I'm going to see if it can make the connection. And it made the connection that it took him 2 or 3 years to make manually in one prompt, because it had all of that data in its training data set. Now, it's not going to make every connection, but it was able to make that one. And so again, his response was the same as Guillaume's, like, oh no. But then again, stepping back, he's like, oh, wait a minute. Like, my job as a humanist isn't to go through archives and read papers in archives. My job is to ask interesting questions, in this case about musicology. And so if this tool lets me speed up my process by 2 or 3 years, that's not threatening, that's amazing. I can do so much more. I can ask the really big questions that I want to ask. And if you're an artist, same deal. This is Rikudan. She's a Japanese author who recently won Japan's highest award for young up-and-coming authors for a book she wrote about an AI-controlled prison in central Tokyo in the near future. And when she accepted the award, she confessed to the media, by the way, I co-wrote my book with ChatGPT. And Twitter did exactly what you would expect Twitter to do. It exploded. There were people on one side saying, she is a visionary, this is the future. And there were people on the other side saying, unless she burned the carbon herself and ground it and turned that into ink and wrote with a quill pen, it is cheating using technology to write literature. And one of the members of the prize committee came forward and said, we know, she disclosed that she wrote with ChatGPT, and we don't care which particular technology she used. This is great literature. This one I like less. This is a neuroscientist on Reddit who says, if GPT-5 is as much better than GPT-4, as GPT-4 was than GPT-3, I am never taking another grad student or postdoc. Now, I think this person has entirely missed the point of being a trainee and training people. The whole point of having students is not just to have zombie labor in your research lab, it's actually to train the next generation of investigator. But there's a sentiment here that is real, which is, so if this thing's got a higher IQ than all of my students and me, it doesn't want to take time off, its partner doesn't break up with it, and then it disappears for 2 weeks and the cell cultures die, this thing's got a lot to recommend it. And if you're only interested in outputs, then that would tend to lead you to a conclusion like this. I think this is a very bad, toxic conclusion for the academy. But what I think is positive is adding technology like this to your research group. And this is already happening in a lot of places. When I have students who need help with copy editing, boy, is it a lot easier in the era of ChatGPT Pro. And you go fight with ChatGPT about your grammar before I fight with you about your grammar. And so there's all of these opportunities to bring this technology into your lab as a tool that assists you in doing what it is you want to do, but I don't think it replaces people. But that conversation is already happening. This is an IT conference, so I felt like I should talk a little bit about IT. And it's just going to be brief. What's the future of being an IT professional? Well, we're all just going to be out of work, right? About a month ago, maybe a little more than a month ago now, this Devon product was released in closed beta, so they had a lot of control over what they were putting out there. And their claim was, if you give it a random GitHub repo, it can autonomously, as an autonomous agent, fix about 13% of the problems, the complaints. And that's impressive. I mean, 13% doesn't sound like that much, but if you've ever worked on a big software project, if you can close 13% of your tickets by pressing a button and letting a robot fix them, that's fantastic. So people freaked out. It's sort of, again, in both directions. There are people saying, this is the end of software development, no one ever needs to be a programmer again. And there are other people saying, this is all a lie. And it turns out, kind of somewhere in the middle, some of it was a lie, it was oversold, they controlled it, they constructed a narrative around it, classic Silicon Valley hype. They got a product they want to sell and get you excited about, and they did that, and they weren't totally honest. So Devon is actually not quite as powerful as the marketing would say, but it's not worthless either. There are open source products, multiple open source products that you can just try yourself and you can see. So go to GitHub, this is one of them, there's many now, and you'll want to use the best LLM you can afford, something like GPT-4 or Claude 3 Opus. And if you are a software developer, try this. And what you will find is that there are some problems it kind of can solve autonomously, but you'll also find there's a lot more where it goes off the rails. Taking current LLM transformer style technology and making it agentic is a really hard problem. But solving that problem comes with an absolutely massive economic incentive. So those of you who are connected to major AI research labs, both in the academy and in industry, know that everyone's racing for this. So it is very likely sometime this year, we will see the first products with kind of decent agentic AI. It's not going to be perfect. It's going to have interesting failure modes, as machine learning models always do. But that sort of changes the conversation. With a chat bot, you are always in control. You feel a huge amount of agency as the human. I type something in and it responds to me. And if I'm tired of the conversation, I can just close the browser window and walk away, and it doesn't text me at 2 o'clock in the morning and say, Mark, I've been reading some of your old papers, and I think there's a flaw in Theorem 3 of this, the proof of Theorem 3 in this paper, because who wants to get that text at 2 o'clock in the morning? But once we start to have agents, we will be saying, here's a task I want you to do, and they will go off and they will do that task, or what they think is that task. And they will fail in interesting and exciting ways, and we'll still need human oversight. But we really are about to step into that era of agentic AI. So what does that mean for us as IT professionals? It means we're going to be doing a lot more managing and a lot less manually logging into the router and changing the routing tables ourselves by hand, because we're going to have agents that can do a lot of this for us. And so now, even as the most junior frontline employee, you're actually going to have employees, machines, working for you. And a lot of what they're going to do is sort of the stuff that you probably don't love doing anyways. You can delegate a lot of that out. And I think that's going to be very exciting. The use cases where this is best fit, nobody knows right now, so there's going to be a lot of experimentation ahead, and you are the cohort that are going to get to be part of this grand experiment. If you are in IT leadership, there is no shortage of consultants who will sell you the solution to IT and AI. Like, we know how to do it. We're the smartest guys in the room. McKinsey, of course. They'll tell you. Don't buy into it. This is the smartest thing written so far from Harvard Business Review. Why adopting Gen AI is so difficult. And as an IT leader, this is what you need to be thinking about. Think back to a few hundred years ago when running water was a novelty and universities first started to install running water on their campus. Would your immediate reaction be, we need a running water task force, and we need a top-down running water strategic plan, and we're going to tell people how to use water and where it's absurd, right? Because some people are going to use water because they just need a drink from the fountain because they're dehydrated. Other people are going to use it and do reverse osmosis because they need it in a lab. The use cases for water really depend on where that water is sitting and being used. What's important is to provide that core infrastructure, some education. Here's how running water works. This kind of water is safe to drink. This isn't. Don't build a big pool of this water and not have someone watch it, or someone might drown. With AI, that education and safety and ethics piece is probably a little more important than water. But part of our role as IT professionals with a general purpose technology, which is what this is to provide education, provide guidance, find opportunities for collaboration, and provide core infrastructure. But it is impossible for any group of people in an organization this big and diverse to know, here are the 5 top use cases for AI. Because even 2 people in the same business functional unit with fairly similar jobs may have different preferences and may have different incentives, and so they will use AI differently. So what I would tell you as an IT leader is listen, think about this in a bottom-up framework. If you want to see some smart writing on this, Ethan Mollick, who I mentioned earlier, on his blog, the most recent couple of blog posts have been him shilling his book. Just look past that and go to the older stuff. He actually talks about, like, how should you adopt AI in an organization, and he's a huge proponent, coming from biz school perspective, of doing this bottom up, which is really hard. That is hard to coordinate. It is hard to make that work, but I think it is really the only way it is going to work. I think if you try to do top down, here's the 3 things we're going to do with AI this year, it's going to be impossible in any organization, and it's going to be doubly impossible in large decentralized organizations like ours. So listen to your stakeholders, engage, provide core services where you can, but you're not going to be able to get your hands around every use case that your community is interested in. Okay, so the big question then is, what's the future of being human? And I stole this question from my colleagues when I was at CFAR. This was how we themed the last global call I was part of at CFAR. Is, what is the future of being human? We got a bunch of really smart people from around the world in the room for a Global Futures Council, and this is what they came up with. There are so many different forces. Of course, I was thinking about AI, but they were thinking about lots of other things. And I think this question is really important, because when our students look at this chart, there's sort of a moment of fear or existential dread for them, because we live in a society where, for many of us, we are our jobs. And we have a tendency to convince our students that they are a bag of skills. Acquire these 10 skills and you can go off and be a junior investment banker and you're going to be very successful. And so that's ingrained into our culture. And what happens when I've created my entire personal sense of identity around, I'm the best computer programmer in London, Ontario. And now the machine's better than me, and everyone has access to the machine. What does that mean for me? Who am I now? It's even better than us at football. So DeepMind embedded a group in a professional football club and came up with a neural net that coaches corner kicks and did the user survey and evaluation, and it turns out the players and the coaches overwhelmingly prefer the AI's strategies for corner kicks over human-generated strategies. So pick something here, pick a skill. It is possible, and maybe even likely, that machines will be better than you at that skill. And here's why I think that. This is just looking at large language models. There are other AI technologies, Monte Carlo tree search, reinforcement learning, so many different things that are also advancing. But let's just look at large language models, because everyone's paying attention to transformers right now. The y-axis, I did label my axes this time, is log perplexity. Perplexity is an approximate measure of how good the text generated by an LLM is. It's not perfect, it's got problems, but it allows you to put a single number on things, and it's an okay proxy. So that's log perplexity, and then we look over time at language models, and lower perplexity is better. So because this is log scale on the y-axis, if I can fit a straight line here, that means I'm seeing exponential improvement. And when I actually look at this and kind of squint, it looks like it's bending down a little bit. Like we might even go a little bit hyper-exponential, just in terms of the capacity of these LLMs. And so I look at that chart, and that's an interesting set of data points. And it is possible that today is the day that these particular approaches to AI plateau. For sure it will plateau at some point. We will need more breakthroughs, new ideas, but today could be the day this plateaus. But even if that were true, I've already shown you a bunch of examples of where this is disruptive to business as usual for us. But when I look at that chart, I don't see evidence suggesting that we're starting to see the other end of the sigmoidal curve. It looks like we are going to continue to experience improvement in these models, I think for at least 2 or 3 years. So I think it's reasonable to imagine a future in which, not a guaranteed future, like I said, things might be plateauing today, right as we're here, but it's reasonable to imagine a possible future, maybe even a likely future, where for the next 2 or 3 years, the capabilities of these machines continue to get better. This chart here has more and more lines on it that start going straight up. Machines couldn't do that 2 months ago, and now they're better than the average human. Any Rick and Morty fans in the audience? So Rick's a cartoon, like evil genius, super scientist, and he creates this little robot to pass butter at the dinner table. And very cruelly, he gives the robot self-awareness. So after it passes the butter a couple of times, it comes over to Rick and it says, "Master, what is my purpose?" And Rick says, "You pass butter." And it looks down at its little butter scoop hands and says, "Oh my God." And Rick says, "Welcome to the club, pal." And so this was a funny comment in an animated cartoon, but I talk to a lot of students right now who feel like the robot. They look at this and think, if I'm not a bag of skills, what am I? And I get the fun, the privilege of telling them, well, great news. You're at a comprehensive university. Here at Western, we have a Faculty of Arts and Humanities. And there are people who work there who work in scholarly traditions millennia old, where they ask questions like, what does it mean to live a good life? What does it mean to be a good human? You should take those courses and engage with that material, because you might find that there is not a universal consensus that your worth as a human is the bag of skills that compose you, right? There are other ways to look at the world. And so if you do that, you can go back to this chart and refactor it in your mind. Instead of saying, like, oh no, the machine's gonna be better at me than accounting, you can say, like, was that really what I wanted? Is what I wanted from life, I'm gonna be the best accountant in Toronto? When I talk to our students, what they want is to have impact. They wanna make a difference in wealth inequality. They wanna solve climate change. And so if you're focused on impact, this chart tells you a different story. This chart tells you that your agency as a human at this moment in time is probably 5 to 10 times greater than any other human has ever had. Because now if I've got a great idea on wealth inequality that no one's tried yet, and I want to start my little not-for-profit, I don't have to hire an accountant straight away. I can get Accountant GPT to help me. I don't have to hire a VP of marketing, because I can rely on a tool to help me. So all of a sudden, instead of thinking, oh no, it's taking skills away from me, I say, okay, great. I'm focused on impact, on the change I want to make in the world, and now I have a tool that can help me do things that tools couldn't help me do 3 years ago. I had to get a person. Gold standard is always still going to be a person, but now you have this little set of minions, of helpers, and you can have a much greater impact on the world just by changing your perspective. And so what if we occupy that future timeline where that line continues for 2 or 3 more years? Imagine a world, and I'm not saying this world will come to pass, this is a thought experiment. Imagine a world where pretty much any task you pick, there is a machine that is better at doing that than the average human, and certainly better than you. Right? That wall of anthropocentrism is just getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. At that point, what you choose to outsource and what you choose to keep for yourself isn't a technology question, it's a values question. And we're already there. If I get an email from a vendor who's an important vendor to the university, and I used to be CIO, so I got to maintain these relationships, but I don't want to talk to a vendor. I don't feel bad going to Microsoft Copilot and saying, politely say no. And it writes a really nice, 3-paragraph business email saying no, and I press send, and I do not feel the least bit bad. But if I did the same for a personal email from my partner, I wouldn't feel very good about that. She would not feel very good about that. And when, people kind of like, oh, that's gross, Mark. Why would you do that? But very, very similar, right? I'm using an LLM to write an email response, and in one case, everyone sort of agrees, yep, that seems like a legitimate use. And in another case, like, oh, that feels like you violated something deep in my values. And so how we use the technology, what we outsource, becomes a question of value. And now we're back to looking to our humanist colleagues again to say, okay, how do we navigate this? Our agency is going to grow as individuals. That's a tremendous amount of power we're going to have, and we have a tremendous obligation to use it responsibly. But fortunately, we have a lot of scholars who already think about these things. And so I'm going to end with this slide again. I know the whole world is not Go. Go is useful because it's an abstract strategy game and really easy to quantify. But I like this because it's data. I've given you a lot of opinions just now, and these are things that I believe and think are likely to happen, but they may not. But the data is right there. Already, training with AI, using AI as a tutor, makes professional Go players better. And not just a little bit better, but better than we thought humans ever could be. So that's not an anecdote, that's data. That's the world we live in currently. If this continues, we will live in an even more exciting world where we have opportunities to use this technology to improve us, to enhance us, and to make the impact we actually want to make on the world. Closing comment from Ethan Mollick. People ask, okay, what should I do? Engage with the technology. AI will do things that will amaze you. Things that you think computers shouldn't be able to do well, it will do well. All of your mental model about the affordances that software offers you are broken by this software because it's different. It will make mistakes, but it can be creative. Excel doesn't make mistakes, but it also isn't creative. So you need to spend time with it. And 10 hours is kind of the magic threshold. Don't spend 10 hours all at once, but if you haven't spent time with generative AI, over a period of a few weeks, give yourself 10 hours, pick the 5 things you hate most about your job, and try to get the AI to do it for you. It will not be able to do all 5, but it might be able to help with 1 or 2. And now your quality of life has improved because something you hate doing, you have a partner to help you do it. And more importantly, you're going to develop intuition for what it's good at and what it's not good at. And you have to keep refining that intuition as new models come out. Happy to take any questions.